It is. All right, we are recording. Good afternoon, everyone. This is the February meeting of the Research Committee of the Maryland Lynching Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It is Monday at 3 o'clock. I am David Armenti, a commissioner representing on behalf of the Maryland Center for History and Culture, formerly the Maryland Historical Society. So if I could ask others in the room to introduce themselves.
Chris Haley, Commissioner from the Maryland State Archives.
I'm Hannah Lane. I'm a staff member at the Maryland State Archives. I'm here as a member of the public.
I'm Emily Olin Squires, also from the Maryland State Archives, just here as a supportive body to the commission, member of the public.
And hello, everyone. My name is Chris Boyle, and I'm a project manager with the Office of the Attorney General.
Thank you so much, and appreciate the grace on any pauses that I have. I am likely taking notes over here on the to at least get some rough minutes of the meeting. So if I take a minute to respond, that's what's going on. So thank you for those introductions. I have not a highly specific agenda for the day, unfortunately. So apologies for that. But also apologies for putting anyone on the spot. But in the second bullet here for the agenda, I have updates from the Maryland State Archives, which I did not run by Chris, Hannah, or Emily ahead of time. So if that needs some time to kind of think on, or if there's anything kind of readily coming to mind that would be worth sharing out at this time.
I would say at this point, there's nothing, say substantive, that was an extra syllable, substantive to the research directly related to the commission at this point. We certainly have ongoing research which has to do with attempted lynchings, which we've expanded out. Well, Hannah's really the one who's really been handling that primarily. And I mean, it's expanded some, which I'll let Hannah speak to. Other than that, we are just continuing on with our served members, looking through the governor's correspondences and miscellaneous files to see if we find any references to people who were lynched specific to the criteria of the commission and also beyond that criteria.
Would you like me to jump off there, Chris?
Sure.
Yeah. So as Chris said, we continue researching as we have pockets of time to do so. Our SERVE program members are working hard, but sadly they have not yet found anything in the series that they're looking through yet. As I continue my efforts looking into attempted lynchings in Maryland, I came across two unexpected and interesting things. Again, not directly related to the work of the commission, which focuses on racial terror lynchings in Maryland. But I found a rather disturbing case in 1924 in Frederick County of a young white woman who was tarred and feathered by a mob of an estimated 50 white men and a couple of women from, I forget which town in Frederick, but I literally just stumbled upon that in a local paper and still need to gather details about that. I also found another tar and feathering case in, I believe, 1858 in, I think it was Kent County. I believe it was Kent County. And again, that was there was an elderly white man who was suspected of being an abolitionist in Kent County, and he was tarred and feathered by white Kent Countyans. And then this mob, after abusing this man and forcing him to promise to leave the state, they then turned their attention to the home of a free Black man. And I believe he was beaten by the mob, as was a free Black woman who was there in the house too. I'm not sure if she was a resident of that house but these are two cases that came across my gaze in my research. And please let me know if my audio is not coming through. I'm getting some slow internet connection notices here, but that is all I had to share thus far. Thank you.
Yeah, we heard all of that perfectly clear, Hannah, so no issues with that getting through. Thank you for that. You kind of expanded on it already. I was going to ask if either case had kind of racial, implications to it, and it sounds like the second one in Kent County did. So, there's at least some relevance there in my opinion, when we talk about the context under which something maybe more extreme like an actual killing under that definition would occur. So I would say that's probably the more interesting of the two as related to the commission's work, and the fact that we do have a kind of burgeoning. Is there a Kent County case? Let's see, because I am. Yeah, James Taylor would be Kent County, correct? Am I remembering that correctly?
I always have to go back to the list just to make
Yeah.
sure I'm not mixing up my counties.
Yeah, that case was interesting because the elderly white man who was tarred and feathered, I believe he was in his 90s, according to the Baltimore Sun, and he was suspected of, I believe, a year or two prior, he was suspected of having furnished a fugitive enslaved person with false documents to their escape. And the free Black man and woman who were then attacked by the mob, the woman in particular was suspected of being somehow connected to a slew of many flights to freedom that were happening in Kent County in the mid-1850s. The Baltimore Sun, it began the story of this tarring and feathering with the narrative of how some 60 enslaved people over the last couple of years had fled from Kent County. So it's super interesting, and I hope to find out more about the individuals involved.
So yeah, we do have one Kent County case. That would have been later, certainly. But yeah, I think just definitely noting for the record that the possibility that this kind of adjacent research can inform, at minimum, like the community context, so to speak, that we understand as we are focusing more on the particular racial terror lynching cases. So I'll circle back on that if there's any more kind of connection to be made, but definitely appreciate that update.
Thank you.
So Chris, just to reiterate there, and I know you've reiterated this a couple of times, so forgive me, but it's the governor's documents related to the governor, their specific collections that you've been focusing on. Do you have maybe a timeline as to how long you think that process will take, or are there other kind of target collections that you see following in that process, or is that getting ahead of ourselves?
I'd say because I don't have someone or someone's specifically available to do it for longer than months at a time, I'd say it's probably, for want of a better term, not realistic to put a time to it, because we don't have a specific person who I can assign to it 24/5, so to speak, 5 days a week, that's all they're going to do. For one, to be mind numbing for them, but that would be the most exhaustive way to go through all of these, which even at that does not guarantee that we will find anything. It's just that the first two people I had on it did find something, which gives me hope that we'll be able to do so again. But however, the SERV members that we have working on it, there's two, three, one is working on it 2 days a week, are here until the end of May. No, they're here until October. Emily, is that right? To October, I think, the SERV members.
That's really
Sort of, kinda.
Unfortunately, I think that their time in the SERV program ends in the summer at some point.
Okay.
I want to say early August, but
Okay.
I'm not 100% sure of that. But why I believe that is true is because I was just recently told in the meeting that the next year of the SERV program starts in September next year. So I can't imagine that they're going to have the first year people still in there while they're bringing second year people in. So I think they're supposed to end in August.
Okay. So that being said, we're February, we're 6 more months or 7 more months, and it's just such a large amount of materials, and it's slow going because it's cursive, and I'm finding out that many people who are within our educational system right now, that they're not being taught cursive. So it's that extra level of trying to understand the handwriting, and then within the handwriting, trying to discern, does this have anything to do with racial-based terror, let alone racial-based terror that involves an actual lynching, such as we describe it. So I guess the better way to answer that question, which is still virtually impossible, is if I had, let's say, two full-time persons to work on this, I would say, in the best of all worlds, it would take a full year for me to think that they could go through so many boxes of materials exhaustively, because then I feel like they would find things. And of course, when you find things, then I have them go off into the deeper research avenues to try to find, are there court cases? Are there other things? Are there letters or documents that relate to whatever references that we find within those miscellaneous cases, which, as you know from your experience, would make it an even longer process. So in other words, if I had two full-time persons, maybe a year. Without that, I don't know. Without that, I don't even think I could confidently say, give it ending date, because there's just so much to go through. And again, that's just one overall series of records, in difference to the other things that we can look at as well. Well, that's positive, huh?
And I guess I was going to have the follow-up question of whether there was a way to, or whether it felt like a feasible or productive thing to fold Heritage Associate staff into that workflow in any way. Although, I mean, again, just like the sheer volume of hours that you're talking about sounds, like it might not be worthwhile, or I don't know.
I think it could be worthwhile if they could be on site.
Yeah, if they would have to be on site. So that's the issue. I think a lot of people back away when they understand all of these records haven't been digitized yet. And so the only way to do it is to sit and look through the originals. So, we have people that are interested in volunteering or helping out with it. But then when we say, hey, or giving a student over to the problem, but then we say, well, yeah, but can they come here? Then it's like, oh, okay, well, no. So I definitely think it, particularly because they have expertise in reading handwriting and they know more what they're looking for. I mean, we're talking about with the service year students, we're working with high school students who haven't had really any deep research experience. And as Chris said, we had to like teach them cursive, not historical cursive, modern day cursive. So it's not like the best group per se. They're doing a great job. I don't want to disparage them, but it's very slow going with the current, and they're not even with Chris the whole, I mean, we talked about to August, they have another rotation. So he doesn't even have them until August. So yeah, so it's a limited amount of time that we have with them even. So they're not the answer, I guess. I'll say that they're not the answer.
Any other aspect of it that's just, I guess, an extra element, again, as you know, David, from when you were working as a part of the Legacy of Slavery program, is that whereas some interns we had, such as Matthew Novick, such as Rosanna Brinkley, who we had last summer, they had stated, they came to us with a specific interest in African-American history, in the study of the Maryland Penitentiary, in, let's say, slavery related or the legacy of slavery related subject matter. So they already had an introduction to that, already had a sensibility about that. Whereas the serve members do not have that. So it's literally, I mean, I'm trying to think of something that could be totally different. If you wanted to go, if you were going to work at a store, I guess if you're going to work at a salesman type job, because you just wanted to sell things, but what you, and they put you into selling timeshares or something like that, but you want to be a salesman. So so you know nothing about timeshares whatsoever. You just know it has something to do with properties that people can buy into, but you have no necessarily any background into this. And yet that's going to be what you're tasked to do every single day. So to some degree, it's like they just came to the Maryland State Archives because we were one of the institutions that was available and accepted to be a part of the program. And then now you're going to do this. And then before that, you're doing scanning. And then you're going to do special collections. And then you're going to do something else. And then figure out if that's an interest for you. So that's what has made it. I mean, they're taking it on like champs. However, it's not that. Whenever we've hired somebody, we always make sure that they have an actual interest for it. Because for one, it's a very challenging topic to really delve deep into anyway.
Yeah, I totally understand that. So I guess my proposal would be to think about, do we kind of see what Heritage Associates, Brett and Donna's, what their accessibility is as far as in-person research, and is there kind of on your end of things, is there a feasible workflow that would not make things more complicated, but could actually potentially speed up that process with folks that are a little more veteran in that sort of work. So obviously neither of them are present here today, but I feel like that could be a reasonable follow up on this conversation. So we can kind of tag that as a next step, if that makes sense.
Do you recall what the status was with the one or two interns they had proposed hiring?
I've not heard any further about whether they were successful in recruiting any interns. I know that there was a description put together that could be, shared out broadly, and I guess perhaps there was a desire that commissioners, especially those attached to HBCUs or other institutions, would kind of share that out. But no, I haven't heard anything further on that.
Okay.
Here's another question, and I should have sent a reminder email to them, but I still want to get it on the table here since we're together. And this is probably primarily for you, Chris, but do you recall that when they first started, when Heritage Associates first started, they were creating basically case study profiles, the Word
Right.
documents that were kind of the baseline information.
Mhm.
I'm wondering if that would be, if it will be worth them revisiting that process, especially for, to kind of update information. And I think also, it came up in the course of newer commissioners starting to do outreach to community members, liaising with local coalitions, so to speak, and that, just having that baseline information, even though it's somewhat rough, is helpful for communication and just people knowing the background of when they're going into conversations with community members, especially.
No, I would agree with that. I would think at this point, I would think in terms of working backwards, so to speak, which is to say, if at this point, the first hearing that we foresee happening is April 13th, I believe. I felt like I saw that email for Frederick County.
Yes.
Then that would be what I would propose that we would say to Heritage Associates, will you please review all of our case studies having to do with Frederick County for any updates or corrections or what have you, and then go backwards from that, which is to say, if we don't have anything else pending after that, which would be terrible, but if we don't have anything else happening after that, then just go back, I would say almost in the order in which the hearings are done. I mean, I think that's one way of going toward it from a done is done point of view. These hearings are over with. We do not really necessarily, to quantify in words, have to do them now. So let's make sure that what we have done about them is as official and is as authenticated as possible. So that means let's go back over the Anne Arundel County ones. Let's go back over the Wycomico, the Somerset, Baltimore County, so that we know that what we have there is as good as it can be at this point, and then we can move forward and not still think, oh, we forgot to do this and we forgot to do that, or we just came up with this. If we try to make sure that what we've finished is really finished, as much as one could say that, and then from that point forward, go with Frederick, and then whichever county we feel is next in line.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And I, even the way you described, I think it's twofold. So it informs, like you said, maybe, it's probably a bad expression, but, closing the case on
Right.
hearings that were done, or at least saying, this is kind of compiles what we have currently understood about these cases, which can also inform, whether the website hosted case studies get updated in a certain
Right.
way, or get additional primary sources attached to them. And then certainly for the upcoming hearings, to not only get our ducks in order in terms of what information's compiled, but that's something that as a committee we can then share out with the
Mhm.
full commission in the lead up to, for example, Frederick County in on April. So yes, like you said, the tentatively scheduled date, and it is still tentative, is Saturday, April 13th. And I was going to kind of give a general update on that. There was a meeting that included some local stakeholders who were willing to participate in the hearing itself, as well as kind of extend our network there in the community. So those conversations are underway. There is a couple possible locations that are being discussed. So it's shaping up. But I do think that, as it has been, the hearing schedule does kind of bring up priority, so to speak, in terms of what things to focus on, or at least to what things to inform our fellow commissioners about in the lead up to that. So I can mark that as another kind of follow-up point for communications with Heritage Associates.
So you moved ahead. So that's the second agenda point now, isn't it? I guess.
Yeah, I moved ahead to
Okay.
commissioners and Heritage Associates general updates. So yes, as related to a tentatively scheduled Frederick County
Right.
hearing, some of our thoughts around planning, but also how research feeds into that planning. We can follow up on some of those points with our contract researchers in the next couple of days.
Okay.
I did want to flag, and I'm sure most people, I'd imagine most people on this call, but I'll just flag it anyway. Especially as we move forward with Frederick County, one of the individuals who did really substantive research and who also has given kind of tentative support and possible participation in a hearing is Dean Herron, who prepared, like I said, prepared a research report that was specific to the cases that took place, the crimes that took place in Frederick County, and is really a wonderful resource to look at for our understanding and our context moving into this. So that's something that is available on the Google Drive, but I can also then redistribute that alongside any commission prepared materials, because I think it's just, we get lucky in some instances where some of the work has preceded us, or a substantial amount of the work has preceded us, and I think this is a really significant example of that. So it should inform a lot of what we put together, and everybody on the Frederick County end is aware. At least as far as I know, they're all aware of this research. So it's not something that we need to share with them, but I think more so internally with the commission as we move toward April. So flagging that as well. Chris, does it feel appropriate to talk about the software or platform that was reviewed? Or is that, I feel like maybe that's a separate conversation out of the public domain.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I feel like, I mean, ultimately, we need to talk about it with Heritage Associates because they're the ones who brought it to our attention. I think it's fine for us to just get a sense of it, like what we all think about it, knowing that we need to go back to them and get more specifics as to what did they really see in it.
Yeah.
And did they see it really for us as the Maryland Lynching Truth and Reconciliation Commission? Did they see it as an additional, I guess, off to the side sort of resource where they could gather research materials or things of that sort? Or I guess one is like, were they trying to promote it to us to acquire for commission purposes? Were they trying to get our advice as to if we felt this software is good for them to use for their own purposes of gathering information? And I think those are two possibilities of what their approach is. Because I know that Brett did send one email where I think he stated that the benefit is obvious or something to that effect. And so again, it's obvious to supply what for who, which is it obvious to supply their services for the commission or to supply services for them? And then we could say, well, yeah, but have you thought of this, or have you thought about that, or have you tried this? I think he said it was working with the church that either they attend themselves, Donna and Brett, or if it's just a church that they know of in their community and the person who was there was their developer. Like, how has it helped that community do what it does? And is that reality one that we could also benefit from? Because I think that's what we did not know. At least I don't recall there being actual explanation of what has it done so far for the church. What are examples of what it's done for the church? And then again, is that what it can or should do for us?
Right. And, I apologize again for not being present for that conversation. So I am trying to kind of piece it together from the recordings and the information that was provided. But yeah, it sounds like there would still be multiple steps, like, if it were to be integrated into the commission's work, or the public presentation of the commission's work, I guess, is maybe more, because it seemed like it was, there was a database, but there's also kind of a front-facing product that could potentially be a support. So it sounds like probably some more group conversation is necessary to really articulate that, or at least some emailing to get that understood a little bit better. Because, ultimately any of those kind of expenses would have to go through, anything outside of the regular scope of work, right, would have to get described and approved by folks other than us, as far as the holding the budget for the commission through the TIL grant, which is our primary funding mechanism. So yeah, I'll make a note to follow up on that as well. So maybe that's another short meeting that then leads to us, either, backing it and taking it for further consideration to the leadership and the OAG's office.
I mean, if we wanted to move it further in any way, I mean, just such as whenever we've had any vendor come here to the archives to offer or propose or supply us with an option for in the digital world, in the electronic record resource world, then there's a first presentation, and then there's, are we interested, are we not interested? And usually there's the test, there's a sampling, which is we send them some materials of the sort that we would normally gather and see what it does with it. What can they do with this to make it more beneficial along the lines of what we currently have, which is the Legacy of Slavery program. We have that database. We can pull up names, we can pull up locations, we can pull up dates. For the lynching program or project, we want to pull up names, we want to pull up locations, we want to pull up dates. Again, we want to pull up, if at all possible, cross references to other type records which might concern such and such lynching. That's the one level. The other level, which is kind of what we thought we were getting, would be some other electronic resource that would be able to store and make searchable these records in a cohesive, constructive, like our guide to government records, where we could find this record, we could find this document, and it would be electronically accessible visually, in difference to just capturing the audio alone, or the someone's oral history alone. Now we've caught it. Now we've got to save it. Now we've got to categorize it in some way where someone can subsequently find it electronically and remotely. And can it do that? And if so, to what degree? So I think that's something we can send them newspaper accounts. We can send them some court papers such as we have, and see if it can link it to something that could be the bounce off point, which is not really the right term, but say we have case studies. So from this case study, you can then get to the oral history that somebody has given about this case. We can now get to the newspapers that are about this case. We can get to subsequent coroner's reports that are about this case. They're all there, and they're all logged in a constructive, relatively speaking, easily accessible format, is what I think we'd like to see if it can do that. and what the limit of that scope is. Like, well, how many, is there a database limit? Is there, I don't know, a cloud limit? What is it that it has? And who would be responsible for maintaining it?
Well, that was piggybacking on Chris's
Yeah.
initial question. I think that was the biggest question as to who was going to put all the stuff in there, because one of the things that I guess the developer or the vendor said that, okay, well, everything has to be put in by hand, and I'm doing that, which is understandable and great. But I didn't get the impression of, as Chris said, whose software would this be and who's filling it up. You know, if we're already having resource problems of enough people to do enough tasks, this would be another task to put things in there. And at least me, I was under the impression we were looking at software more for file sharing purposes, like sharing amongst each other. I didn't realize it was a presentational piece of software, which it's not a bad thing that it was, but it wasn't. I think Chris had invited Corey specifically because he thought it was like a file sharing, file uploading, and trading files among the commissioners and possibly among the public, and getting files from the public. And so this seemed like totally different. It seemed like like story map sort of scenario, which again is not bad. But I think we just have to be understanding of, if we were to acquire this, someone would need to be tasked with the management of the software, the entering of the data into the software, making sure that it stays up to date. And I guess the question is who would that be? Would that become a Heritage Associate's responsibility, an archives responsibility, a research department responsibility, or, you know, who the committee's responsibility is? So I don't think that was clear. And I don't think we were ready for that sort of presentation. So I think that's why we didn't ask that question at the time. But upon reflecting upon it, I think those are questions that we have.
That is all understandable. And, you know, again, I think those are all valid points, and I'm trying to get myself caught up. So this is very helpful. And, you know, to the question of where's this like default work fall to, I think the implication is that the website hosting entity and agency, which is you all, and that's just not something that we, you know, want to take lightly. So I think that's enough for us to chew on, and I'm happy to follow up by email to, you know, maybe articulate some of those points, but also what the process would look like, you know, in any instance. But yeah, I haven't gotten any further information since maybe communications a couple of weeks ago in the follow-up to that meeting. Another thing that I will just note from the Heritage Associates side of things, which I did try to advance by email, is that there is based on research, there had been the identification of a possible descendant of the Calvert County victim, Mr. Whitley. So that request for outreach support, which, you know, we've talked about in many instances, it feels reasonable and responsible for commission leadership to send that sort of outreach, so it's, you know, feels credible and, you know, just has the stamp of the state and our overall efforts attached to it. So that I believe I sent that last week to reiterate that request to commission leadership. So mentioning that here as well for the record, that process hopefully should be underway. And, you know, again, Trish being on the call as the OAG and representative and project manager, I believe I CC'd on those communications. So I think working could be kind of a supporting voice on that process, but that has happened a couple of times, and we do have somewhat of a, not a template, but we at least have examples of other similar outreach that's been developed in a letter format. I also want to mention, this is not, I guess this would qualify as new business, so I'm kind of transitioning into that component. And I believe this is something that has intersected with the state archives, but maybe not. The Maryland Lynching Memorial Project as well is developing or updating its database presence within, I guess, within their website. So they have reached out to, for example, my institution to see, if further research can be done here, as well as further digitization of records. So I think they're probably reaching out to multiple entities around the state. Again, I don't know how I feel about the process as related to this, because it does, there's confusion. There's about what entity is gathering what and from whom. But that communication has come here through the special collections department at my institution. So I expect that similar outreach is going on amongst other institutions. So that is, again, related to our kind of nonprofit counterpart at the Maryland Lynching Memorial Project. So as we're thinking about visualization of data and hopefully not replicating efforts, although that's inevitable that we will do similar things, just so we know that process apparently is ongoing as well. So I believe that's all that I had at the moment. Any other new business questions or anything to add on to the other points of discussion? Yes, Emily.
I just wanted to take a moment to invite Trish potentially to meet with us at the archives to learn a little bit more about what we do, and specifically how her job intersects with what we do, because unfortunately for the last project coordinator that was with us for a period of time, Stephanie Thompson, we didn't have that meeting until towards the end of her tenure. And then when she went to pass on her files on behalf of the commission, it was kind of a frantic, it was more positive than frantic, but she was sort of overwhelmed with the, wow, had I known this all along, I might have done things differently. So I would love to have a chance for Trish to meet with Chris and I and Hannah, just to talk a little bit about our role separately, not just researching the victims and the incidents, but our role of archiving the commission's records specifically for perpetuity, because they are the records of a state body and they are permanent records. And so the records of the business being conducted in the preparation for the hearings and all of that, those are permanent records. So I feel like if we get out in front of it and talk to you about those responsibilities, then, at the end of the period, you won't be like, what? I've got to do what? And then you're scrambling to try to get files to transfer. So I just wanted to bring that up because I hadn't had a chance to really meet Trish or talk to her independently. We've all been in these big meetings together, but since this is a relatively small group, I wanted to issue that invitation.
And invitation accepted. I would love to plan that with you. I can offline with you, get you and Hannah's email, and then we can set up a time that coordinates best for everybody. And I can, definitely come by, do a tour, learn a little bit more about the process. And I think that will be a great experience. Thank you.
Excellent. Love to have you.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for your time. Again, I have a few points for follow-up, particularly related to some of the process for updating our research information, prioritizing likely upcoming hearings, of which there are a couple of ongoing conversations, and furthering communication with our contracted partners.
Nope, none on this end.
All righty. Well, continue with your happy Monday, as it were.
For
Thank
sure.
you. I hope
Thank
you have
you
a
all
great
to you all
for
day.
soon.
your work.
Thank you
very
guys.
much. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay.
Thank you all. Have a good day.